Bring it on, One-Eyed Willie.
Ooh! Yeah! Your bullets. They're really fast.
Welcome to Mojo the Movies. My name is Eric, and joining me today is Justin, who is a producer in our comic books department. How you doing, Justin?
Pretty good.
This is very exciting because we are talking superheroes, specifically Deadpool 2. We went to see it, and this is our spoiler-free review. So, don't worry. We won't give anything away. Hopefully, no. This is a safe place. No triggers.
No, well, maybe some triggers.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, this is Deadpool after all. So the first movie I found really it was revolutionary in the way that it treated the superhero on screen. And I got the sense that this movie kind of took that spirit of the first one and just amped it up.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I was kind of worried about that going into this movie, that they would take the things that worked in Deadpool 1 and just kind of elevate them and do them again in different ways. But they didn't go that route. They did take certain things that worked in the first one and just doubled down on them in this movie and kind of brought them to the forefront. There's like way more references to other superhero movies.
The self-referential
Yeah,
stuff.
lots of fourth wall breaks, even more so than in the first movie. And it works really well.
It didn't feel tired, right?
No, it didn't. And that's a testament to the writing of this movie, because it would have been really easy for people to just be like, okay, we get it, Deadpool breaks the fourth wall. But every time it kind of felt refreshing and fun, and that he was kind of on the audience's side in a lot of ways. And I thought that was a real breath of fresh air for this movie.
You get the sense that this is, it's just a total free-for-all in terms of insults. Nothing is sacred.
Right.
Nobody is safe. They went after absolutely everyone, including themselves.
Yeah.
I guess fans of other superheroes, of other franchises, be warned, because
yes, I heard one person in the audience at one point go, that's a cheap shot, and I'm like, nothing's safe, man.
Right, exactly.
You can't hold grudges. Nothing's safe.
I absolutely love how meta this movie gets. I would say more so than the first one. And in many ways, you got to hand it also, you were talking about the writing, you have to hand it to Ryan Reynolds, because not only was he the star of the movie, but I think he also had a writing credit.
He had a writing credit, a producer's credit, and I think you can really tell that Reynolds has taken over this franchise and kind of, there's been has been said about how he kind of rose it from the ashes. No one wanted to make this movie, and he kind of was the champion of it. And now that it is a big success and it has turned into this like cultural moment, he is totally like the centerpiece of this franchise in more ways than one, off screen and on screen. So that's really refreshing to see.
If you think about it, talking about the casting, and we'll get to the others as well.
Right.
Ryan Reynolds, at this point, I can't disassociate the character from the actor. So, in a way that Hugh Jackman just became Wolverine, and I can't imagine. I mean, at some point they're probably going to have to cast a new Wolverine, and that's going to be really painful.
Right.
I can't imagine any other character playing Deadpool at this point.
Well, there are a handful of actors and performances that have kind of like become synonymous with their character. And the testament to that is that you hear a lot of people say, when I read Deadpool now, I hear Ryan Reynolds' voice in my head.
Yeah.
And I think that, like, there are only a handful of people. Another example is Mark Hamill's Joker on the animated series of Batman. A lot of people say when they read the Joker, that's all they can hear. And I think it's kind of become the same thing. Reynolds is just embodies that persona so brilliantly.
Does it so well.
Yeah, and it never feels too silly or too like childish. It always feels just the right, perfect comedic tone. And that's not an easy thing to pull off from a vocal performance.
Well, let's also talk about the rest of the casting. I mean, there's certain people we can't mention,
certainly,
because this is spoiler-free.
Yes.
But one person who has appeared in the trailers quite a bit is, I want to make sure it's Zazie, right?
Zazie Beetz.
Zazie Beetz, yeah, from Atlanta.
She's made a name for herself on Atlanta. She plays Domino in this movie.
She's amazing.
She's incredible. It's like every time she's on screen, you just want more of her. She's got like the coolest action set pieces, in my opinion. Like when she's on screen kicking ass, it's like the most exhilarating stuff in the movie as far as I'm concerned. And that character has always been kind of in the background. She's always been around in the X-Men comics, but like it was cool to see her take center stage in this really major way and become like a comedic character as well. Mm-hmm. I thought the way that they handled that character was kind of brilliant.
So she's not so funny in the comics?
Not so much. And in this, she really does shine. Like she does get a lot of funny lines and moments to just like have the spotlight. It's great.
Now, speaking of serious characters who get a couple of chances to be funny, got to talk about Cable. I mean, everyone, you know, I feel like the anticipation for this movie, there's a lot of talk about Josh Brolin and about Cable, so how did you feel that he fit into the larger picture?
So for Cable and Deadpool, that's always been like a very strong dynamic in the comics. They've headlined many titles together. There's been Deadpool and Cable. There's been Cable and Deadpool. Like they've just been
They're like
partners.
Cagney and Lacey.
Yeah, it's the classic straight man. It is kind of like that. It's the classic straight man and goofy character pairing that works. And in this movie, they kind of went all the way extreme with that. Josh Brolin's scenes are like very dark when he's on his own, and like almost like a completely different movie.
Felt like T2.
Yeah, it did.
Or even the original
Definitely.
Terminator.
And that character is heavily inspired by like the Terminator concept. But when he gets brought in and Deadpool has their interactions, it kind of feels like Brolin gets brought into Deadpool's world more so than Deadpool goes into the darkness, if that makes sense.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that really helps the tone of the movie, because had it just been silliness all the way through, it kind of may have been tiresome at some point. But you get this like straight character for him to play off of, this super edgy, like and it's really funny. Their dynamic works a lot. Their chemistry is great. Brolin absolutely kills it.
Well, so what's going on with Brolin? All of a sudden, Thanos versus Cable.
Yeah.
Which is a good idea for video, by the way.
Yeah, we
let
should
us know
definitely.
if you want us to do something like that. But I mean, how did he become the go-to superhero guy?
You know, it's funny because both those characters on the page are like, I don't want to say two-dimensional, but they are very much like these operatic, kind of very comic booky characters. Thanos is this giant purple guy who wants to kill half the universe, and
Grimace.
Cable is a guy from the future with a giant gun and a million pouches with, you know, tools and crazy stuff in them. But, you know, it's funny that he manages to bring a humanity to both those characters in a way that I don't think anyone really saw coming. So hats off to Josh Brolin for really breathing life into two, ultimately, characters that people could have said, oh, these are goofy, who cares? He really made them people, and interesting people.
Because he's got that gravitas.
Yeah.
But there was something else I wanted to ask you. I mean, you being a big comic book fan, how faithful do you feel that this is to the storylines in the comics?
So for Deadpool, the first movie was actually surprisingly faithful to the comics and the source material. The changes that they did make were like, it made sense cinematically for those changes to be implemented, but there wasn't something so drastic where I was like, well, that's hardly Deadpool anymore. Mm-hmm. And for this movie, they made more changes to certain aspects of the Deadpool mythology, but at the same time, Deadpool is one of these characters where every time a new writer takes him on in the comics, certain things change.
He's malleable.
He's malleable. His backstory has changed numerous times to the point where it's almost a joke that he doesn't really have a concrete backstory. And I think the way that they went about like presenting elements of his story in this were really smart, and we can get into that when we eventually do our spoiler review. But I think that the way that they handled those dramatic beats that are familiar to Deadpool readers and brought them in so that an audience could understand them without creating these like crazy characters and having to introduce all this backstory was kind of brilliant, and they deserve a real hat tip for that one.
And you know, I get the sense that, you know, the MCU has its own rule book about how to translate something to the big screen. The same goes with DC, same goes with X-Men, but it's almost like they're throwing the rule book out the window when it comes to Deadpool.
One thing that I really like about this movie, and it's partially because it's allowed to be like silly in its tone, and it doesn't have to like launch this franchise in a way, is for the MCU, when they're gonna bring in a new character, it's a big deal, right? Mm-hmm. Because presumably we're gonna be seeing that character for a long time. When they introduce Black Panther, for example, it's a big deal. Who are they gonna cast? Then they cast the guy. It's like, all right, he's in Civil War, then there's Black Panther. In this movie, I really felt like anyone can show up.
Right.
They can just pull out an absurd, weird character, and they do.
They do.
And it can just be a throwaway thing. They don't have to be like, and then, you know, Firestar's gonna get his own movie. No, they just, it's kind of more like comics in a way, because not every character in the comics gets their own title. A lot of them are just background characters, and it was cool to see this movie do that in a way that other movies haven't necessarily done it.
I guess because they have the license to do that.
Right.
And nowhere else can they do that.
They can do it purely for comedy's sake.
So did you like this Deadpool 2 better than Deadpool 1?
It's a bit early to tell for sure, but I think I did, only because I felt like everything that I liked about the first one was elevated and made even more like concrete in this one. So yeah, I think Deadpool 2 is definitely builds on the success of the first one.
What about the action? I mean, clearly the first one was, chock full of action, but this one, again, amped it up that much more. Did you feel that there was a different, the action, the violence?
Right. I think the biggest difference is the change in director. So the first movie was directed by Tim Miller, who left the project, and now it's David Leitch, who had been working on the John Wick movies. He co-directed John Wick. And I think you can really tell that change in the action set pieces. Whereas the Tim Miller movie felt like it was about creating these like very awesome, almost splash pagey action moments where Deadpool would skewer the guy and it would freeze on that, and you'd get to like really see that. In this, it felt a little bit more dynamic. There was a lot more movement. The camera kind of followed the action a lot more still, and you got to see everything. And there was a lot more big action set pieces, I found, scattered throughout the movie.
At one point, I couldn't believe you were sitting beside a woman who had a toddler.
A baby. Full baby.
Who brings a toddler to a Deadpool movie? I certainly would
Very
not have,
well-behaved baby, I do have to say. It didn't bother me at all.
Scared out of his mind.
Yeah, it must have been.
Okay, let me ask you lastly about the story. I mean, there's not much we can reveal, but how did you feel that the story worked, and in comparison to the first one as well?
So we talked a little bit about this before, but ultimately I feel like these movies are very silly, and I think they know that. But what's smart about the writing, and hats off to the screenwriters for this, is that from the beginning of both movies, they kind of establish a theme, and they kind of spell it out. In the first movie, this is a love story, and in this one, it's family. And the whole time, you kind of keep it in the back of your head, but you're like, how is this movie about mass murder and violence and all this stuff? How is this about family? And I think that the brilliance of it is both movies like set you up for what feels like a very concrete thematic element, and then go on these wild goose chases of craziness and references and fourth wall breaks. And then at the end, it does manage to land what they promised at the beginning of the movie. And I think that ties those movies, from their storytelling perspective, it ties those movies together in a really interesting way.
So maybe that's their rule book. We were talking about but at least they have a way to tie it all together. I absolutely love this.
Yeah.
I think if you liked the first one, you will definitely not be disappointed in this one.
For sure.
This is about as much as we can say without spoiling anything, so thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And we will be back once the movie comes out with a full spoiler review, so check that out. And don't forget to subscribe to Mojo Talks for more conversations like this. Thank you. Thank you. See ya.
You're no hero.